Over the last several years, I've really been interested in the dark side of the workplace, how people cope with difficulties. And one of the most challenging occupations you can possibly have is being an entrepreneur. It's one of the most stressful occupations available. And so it faces people who are entrepreneurs face a lot of challenges trying to figure out ways to cope with these incredibly stressful circumstances while also oftentimes having to do it alone without much support. We wanted to understand not just the challenges that they face, but the more positive side of that, which is really trying to see how people can actually overcome these challenges and be successful despite all of the hardships they face. My research on entrepreneurial resilience started with the idea of trying to understand at its very core, if we were to study entrepreneurs before they even became entrepreneurs and got assessments of their resilience levels at that point, would it actually help them be more successful and have their business survive over a long period of time? We had a sample of entrepreneurs who were getting support from a government-backed program to encourage people to become entrepreneurs. And then we studied them and the way that they thought about entrepreneurships and the way that they behaved as entrepreneurs over the next 2 years, and then were able to predict whether or not they were ultimately successful and still had businesses operating 2 years later. They actually see all of these difficulties, which are inevitable in entrepreneurship, almost in a welcoming way, as a way of saying, hey, we actually see this is going to be difficult, but it's going to help me get better. And so I see it as a challenge that I'm willing and able to tackle. Another key insight that we get from the research on entrepreneurial resilience is the importance of entrepreneurial proactivity, to behave in ways that encourage the business rather, to continue to get better, to grow, to actually tackle problems before they arrive. For example, scanning the environment for what your competitors are doing, to fix any logistical issues within the business, and to do this on an ongoing basis as opposed to simply just waiting for something to go wrong later on. So it's the foundation of entrepreneurial resilience, helping people to see things from a challenge mindset and then behaving proactively that ultimately results in business survival. The question of self-confidence is really interesting, and we looked at that in our research as well because we wanted to see whether self-efficacy, which is the belief in your ability as an entrepreneur, is an alternative predictor, if it predicts as well as resilience, and it didn't. And so there's something very unique about resilience, and it's, I think, in part because resilience helps with stress appraisal. And entrepreneurship is so stressful that the ability to overcome stressors specifically is really what drove this challenge mindset, proactivity, and business survival. Whereas self-efficacy, which is that confidence, that belief in yourself, can actually be detrimental in some instances. It's generally helpful, but imagine the entrepreneur who won't listen to feedback, who is so self-confident that he or she doesn't even listen to advisors and won't actually learn from the challenges they're facing. So we need people who do have that confidence, but are also resilient. And it's really that psychological resilience and that positive emotions that help them cope after the long run. Entrepreneurs can really take away the notion that they may have a baseline level of resilience, but that's not the end of the story. They can then start to actually question when they start getting stressed out and overwhelmed. First off, recognize that that's natural. That's inherent in the entrepreneurship process, that most entrepreneurs feel stressed out and overwhelmed at some point in time. So accept that as natural, and then use that as a way of starting to see the challenges that you're faced with as opportunities, really. And it's not just about feeling overwhelmed, but instead start to frame it towards the positive. Always try to keep those positive emotions in mind, and use those positive emotions as a way to leverage your proactive behavior. Even though it's tough, even though you're swimming upstream half of the time, it's always worth it to try to look at the positive, because the second you start to frame things in the dark side, to start to actually think about things from the threats and the stress and the anxiety, it inhibits future action. And we don't want that. We want people to still continuously make those improvements that help them get better.